It's the NASH disease, and the field of NASH worldwide, and what GenFit is doing currently to try to develop a new drug, because NASH today is still a disease with an unmet need. There are no treatment out there to treat NASH, so that's very important, and we're very happy and proud to be part of the two companies leading the field with the first phase 3 in development towards a new drug to be available for patients. So it's non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. So non-alcoholic is very important because that's just the etiology, that it does not come from alcohol. And steatohepatitis, it's actually a disease that is a liver manifestation of metabolic disease. So it's metabolic driven, okay? And it comes to having lesions in the liver, okay? So in the end, NASH is actually a definition of disease that is seen on a liver biopsy. That's the only way to put the diagnosis of NASH. And you do see lesions. So you start with a healthy liver, then you have fat accumulation inside the liver, that's steatosis, and then you go forward to NASH, which is actually association of several lesions in the liver. You have the steatosis, the fat accumulation, you have inflammation, and then you have cell injury, which is called ballooning. So those three histological lesions that are seen on the liver biopsy are actually the definition of NASH. There are very few symptoms. You do have like general symptoms of fatigue, and people are tired, but it's very general, not specific to the disease. So it's very hard to depict, and for patients, might not know that they're actually NASH. You really need to have exams. You might have elevated liver enzymes, but not always. So there's really no way, instead of, you have to perform exams, and the liver biopsy is the only way to diagnose today. So it is invasive today, and of course, and GenFit also is participating in that, in finding new ways of diagnosis NASH without having to go through liver biopsy. So this is all, the research on biomarkers to be able to identify the patients, through just routine blood tests, to be able to identify the patients who actually have the disease without having to perform an invasive liver biopsy. Today, there's no approved treatment at all for NASH. So, what's important, like I said, it's a metabolic disease, so you do have comorbidities, diseases that are linked with metabolic. So you have high lipids, you also have, also diabetes. A lot of diabetics have NASH, and when you look at the prevalence of the disease in the general population, you do have you have about 12% of the adult population in the US that have NASH, but you have up to 72% of diabetics and obese patients who have NASH. Usually you treat, if they have high lipids or too much glucose, you try to give them, anti-diabetics, or you give lipid-lowering treatments. But for NASH itself, there's no approved drug out there today. That's why it's really a high unmet medical need today, and we need to address this with new therapies. So actually, it's the drugs in development today, and with, the first two drugs that will be in phase 3, we'll be able to probably have drugs on the market for that, to treat that condition. But today, there's no option rather than lifestyle, modifications are the things you want, and you want to treat the comorbidities, so meaning, diabetes, if they're diabetics, weight loss. Weight loss is actually the best way today to actually treat NASH. That's the only thing we have. There are a lot of companies now working on NASH, but really there are two companies. So GenFit is one of the two leading companies because we're launching the phase 3. So there are two phase 3s right now. The others, we have other, phase 2 or a lot of phase 1 also. So people are looking into new drugs to treat NASH. But right now the trials, two major trials in phase 3. Technically, it's a PPAR alpha delta agonist, and it has different activities, and that's what the ideal thing for the NASH patients, like I said, who are metabolic patients. So we do have a large focus of activity with our drug, and so you have effect on inflammatory markers, you have effect on all the glucose homeostasis, so all the diabetic dysfunctions that you might have, all the different markers. You also have treatment of lipid profiles, so we have an efficacy on all the bad lipids go down, the HDL, the good lipid goes up, so all these activities together, and it is a liver-centered drug, so meaning we do have also a direct effect on the liver, and so we're looking now, of course, with our drug development into the liver biopsies to check on the lesions in the liver, but it's really associated with all these different cardiometabolic markers and activities, so we're really adding, on top of the efficacy that we've already shown on liver histology, very good safety in our full program up to the end of phase 2B. And so now we also have, all the cardiometabolic activity, which is very important to address in these patients. And just to remind you that the NASH patients, their first cause of mortality is actually cardiovascular disease. So they do have liver function, liver failure in the end. It's an evolutive disease, but the first cause is cardiovascular death. Our drug is very safe. We've had now our phase 2b that was just concluded, so for a full year. And with the higher dose that was tested is 120 milligram. And this will be the dose that will be tested for phase 3 with no signals on safety. We just did, a lot of actually the cardiovascular safety. Not only was it safe, but it was actually efficient in treating those factors, those cardiovascular risk factors. It's a first-line therapy, just the fact that there's no other drugs out there. And what they have to know is that it's actually, the fact that it has this association of different effects, other than just the liver histology, that it's a very good drug to aim for the NASH patients because of all the efficacy on the metabolic syndrome, parameters that we have. And I think it's very important to address because the doctors should know that since we are also adding some effects in the phase 2b, we actually showed that patients were, for instance, with that had high lipids were already under statins, and we have this additive effect. So on top of existing treatment for lipid-lowering drugs, and in the same way, we had additive effect on top of oral anti-diabetics. It's something that is safe to use, and not only safe to use with this treatment, but also that adds a little more efficacy over these treatments. Right now we're very busy in the preparation and launch of the big phase 3 trial, so it will be an international trial that will be used for registration of the drugs. With a new anti-NASH drug, you have to prove that you actually resolve the NASH in your patient. So it's a histological endpoint of resolution of NASH without worsening of fibrosis. So that's what we're going to show for registration and early approval based on the histological endpoint over an 18-month period. And we have an extension for that trial because we have to look at the long-term outcome. What you have to show, you do have reversal of NASH, but in the end, you're able to show that you limit the progression to cirrhosis. So it'll be a large trial, international, of course, and looking at this interim endpoint, of resolution for the registration and the long-term endpoint of progression to cirrhosis.